Before we get started, I thought you guys might want to take a look at my adorable cats. Hi, kitty. Yeah, she's not having it. Okay, back to audiobooks and stuff. Chapter 2: The Bus Stop. The only thing worse than your first day in a new town, thought Daniel, is your first day in a new school in a new town. On that morning, his parents offered to drive him, but Daniel knew it was hard enough being the new kid without getting chauffeured around by your parents. He knew better than to give in to the butterflies in his stomach. The first day at a new school was like the first swim in a cold lake. It was better just to dive in and get the initial shock over with. So, after a quick breakfast, Daniel grabbed his brand new backpack and walked bravely to the bus stop at the end of Elm Lane. As he waited, he tried to distract himself by reflecting on the mysterious Molly Lee. It had been several days since their strange meeting, and he hadn't seen so much as a glimpse of her since then. No matter how many times he replayed the scene in his head, he could not figure out how Molly had gotten into the street, rescued Georgie from the oncoming car, then returned to her original spot that fast. And all without Daniel seeing a thing. As something of an amateur sleuth, Daniel had carefully worked out three possible explanations. The first, and most likely, if least interesting, solution was that Daniel was just flat out wrong. That when he thought he'd seen Georgie run out into the street, he had simply been mistaken. But perhaps it was just Georgie's big blue ball that rolled out there, and Daniel mistook that flash of color for his brother. The only problem with this was that Daniel had clearly seen Georgie run out into the street. Which brought Daniel to the next, and somewhat more interesting possibility. He was going insane. Perhaps he had contracted some kind of rare tropical brain fever, like in the Sherlock Holmes story, The Adventure of the Dying Detective. And now he was seeing things. The upside of brain fever would be that you probably got to miss a lot of school, but the downside was, well, you had brain fever. That couldn't be all that fun. And the fact that, other than his one little hallucination, Daniel felt fine, pretty much ruled out the rare disease theory, which left explanation number 3, by far the most exciting one. That somehow Molly really had been quick enough to run over and save Georgie from the oncoming car, and then carry him back, all before Daniel could take a single step. Either she was that fast, or she made it appear she was that fast. Perhaps Daniel was the victim of some kind of crazy practical joke. In the Holmes stories, anything that defied explanation or seemed in some way supernatural was always a hoax. Whatever the answer, all the evidence told him that there was something very interesting about Molly, not the least of which was the sight of her standing right in front of him. He'd been so wrapped up in his own thoughts he hadn't even seen her approach. Some detective. Molly looked to be wearing the same pair of dirty jeans as before, though Daniel suspected that all of her jeans looked this way, since she didn't seem the type to let a good pair of jeans go undirtied. Standing next to her was a small boy about their age, but a good several inches shorter. He was wearing a pair of thick glasses and a little boy-sized tie. In stark contrast to Molly, the way this boy was dressed reminded Daniel more of a tiny adult than a kid. Molly nudged the boy in the ribs. "Rowan, look, it's the new kid I told you about." The short boy stared at Daniel, squinting at him from behind bottle-thick lenses. Daniel waved at them. Rowan looked back at Molly. "Seems perfectly nice to me." "I like his brother better," she said. "I thought you said his brother was like 2. "Yup," she answered. "Exactly." Daniel found this talking about him as if he wasn't there thing very unsettling. "Daniel," he said. "Excuse me?" asked Rowan. "Daniel. My name's Daniel. Not new kid." "Whatever," Molly smirked. "Oh," said Rowan, blinking. "Of course. Pleased to meet you, Daniel." This Rowan kid even talked like a little adult, and sure enough, the next minute he was shaking Daniel's hand, a firm, professional handshake. "Don't mind Molly," said Rowan, smiling big. "She's a bit territorial. She doesn't like it when new people show up, in her neighborhood. Bears are like that too, you know. Big, stupid bears." Molly just rolled her eyes and snorted, but it made Daniel relax a little to see Rowan poking fun at her without getting hit. Rowan stopped, sniffing the air. He made a face. "Uh-oh." "Speaking of big and stupid," said Molly, pointing to something coming down the street. Daniel turned to see 2 rough-looking boys walking towards them. Something about them just said trouble. It was the way they walked, maybe, or the fact that they weren't carrying book bags, or books at all for that matter. They just looked tough, like the kind of boys who planned to pay for lunch with someone else's money. "Crud," said Rowan. "It's Clay Cudgens. He and Bud must have missed the bus and decided to hike up here to our stop. Or they just decided to start their day off with a little fun," said Molly. "Watch yourself around those two, new kid." "Yeah," echoed Rowan. "Same goes for all of us." For some reason, Rowan had put on a nose clip, the kind that you wear for swimming. Daniel had never seen a sillier sight than little Rowan standing there wearing a tie and nose clip, but he didn't have time to comment on it because Clay and Bud were upon them. "Well, looky here, it's Molly and her girlfriend Rowan," shouted one of the boys. Physically, he was the skinnier of the two, but something in the look of his eyes said he was definitely the meaner. He was wearing a Gristique concert t-shirt, decorated with skulls and decapitated bodies. His enormous friend's shirt was plain, except for the word Bud, which was stenciled unevenly in the front. Daniel heard Rowan whispering to Molly, "Just ignore them, Moll." But Molly didn't look as if she were about to go along with Rowan's plan. Daniel could practically hear her teeth grinding together. "Aw, yeah, Clay," said Bud. "Rowan is Molly's girlfriend because Rowan is such a girl. Good one, man." Bud's arms were a little too thick, and his head was a little too small. He looked like a bald ape with a Twinkies problem. Then there was the smell. This Bud character stank. At first, Daniel wondered if there was some kind of roadkill nearby, or perhaps an open sewer, but before long he realized that the stink was coming off Bud. The kid had a stench that went way beyond regular body odor. It smelled like rotten garbage if you buried it in a pile of raw fish, then left it out in the sun, in summer, somewhere in the land of stink. Rowan and Molly were openly covering their noses. Daniel now wished he had a ridiculous-looking nose clip of his own. Even Clay seemed to have had all he could take of his friend's smell. "Yo, Bud, stand downwind, man. You're gonna make me lose my breakfast," said Clay. "Sorry, dude, it gets worse when I get excited," said Bud, as he stepped back a few feet from the rest of them. "So," said Clay, sizing up Daniel, "who's this?" Daniel's legs turned soft and jelly-like as Clay's beady eyes focused on him. It was like being looked at by a strange, mangy dog. You don't trust it, and you don't dare turn your back on it. So you just stand there, frozen. Daniel had once read that when facing a wild animal, you should never show fear because animals can smell weakness, and it only makes them hungrier. Bolstering his courage, he took a deep breath and answered, "My name's... Oh no, had he just forgotten his own name? I'm the new kid," said Daniel, sounding just like lunch. "His name's Daniel," answered Molly, much to Daniel's surprise. "Daniel, huh?" Clay sneered as he stepped closer. He was a good several inches taller than Daniel. "So, are these your new friends, Daniel? A crazy Buddha and a girl?" "I'm Hindu, not Buddhist," Rowan chirped. "Shut up, no one's talking to you," said Bud from several feet away. "So, what's the story, new kid?" asked Clay, putting one of his long arms around Daniel's shoulders. "Are these losers your friends, or what?" Daniel immediately recognized what was going on. Clay was giving him a choice. In Clay's eyes, Daniel was a blank slate, a new kid with no allegiances. He could become friends with anyone, with Rowan, Molly, a couple of bullies like Clay and Bud. Trouble was, in order to befriend a bully, you had to become one. Daniel was going to have to go with a short kid and the tomboy. "Yeah," he said, gesturing to Molly and Rowan. "I guess they are my friends." Clay's eyes narrowed to tiny slits. "Too bad for you, new kid," he said. "Just for that, I think I'll take that nice new backpack you're wearing. I left mine at home." Clay gave Daniel's backpack a little tug. Daniel held firm. He knew he wasn't a match for these two, but that didn't mean he was going to give in this easy. "Come on, new kid," said Bud, leering. "You don't want to get hurt, do you?" Still, Daniel wouldn't let go. He wasn't a fighter, but if he gave up now, these two would hound him for the rest of the year. Daniel had no intention of being marked as an easy target. An ugly look crept over Clay's face. "Warned ya!" Clay pulled again, only this time much harder. Impossibly hard. Daniel felt his feet leave the ground, and when his head finally stopped spinning, he realized that Clay had thrown him 12 feet at least. This boy was stronger than a grown man. Stronger than 10 grown men. Molly came to his rescue. Daniel didn't even see her move, but there she was, standing face to face with Clay, yelling at him to return Daniel's backpack. Bud began giggling like a hyena. The air grew thick with his stench. Daniel was bruised up a bit, and his head was still ringing from being thrown around like a rag doll, but he wasn't about to sit by and let Molly fight this fight for him, no matter how strong Clay might be. "I can handle this," said Daniel, getting to his feet. "Give me back my bag, Clay." "Oh, the new kid's a scrapper, huh?" said Clay, looking over Molly's head. "Okay, tell you what. If you can take this backpack from me, you can have it. I'll even let you have the first punch. Bud, grab me one of those rocks." Bud reached down and picked up a fist-sized rock from the side of the road. Daniel swallowed hard. A rock like that could seriously hurt someone, or worse. "Give it to him," said Clay. Bud tossed the rock to Daniel, who caught it awkwardly with both hands. What was this kid up to? Was he crazy? "Okay, give me your best shot." Daniel hesitated, staring at the heavy rock in his hand. "Come on, Daniel. I've even given you a weapon. Hit me as hard as you can." Daniel felt sick to his stomach as Clay smiled a wicked smile. "Of course. Then it will be my turn," said Clay. "But I promise I'll only use my fist." This was turning very serious. "That's enough, Clay!" shouted Molly. "This is none of your business, Molly," answered Clay evenly. "It's between me and Daniel here." "I'm making it my business," said Molly through clenched teeth. "He lives on my block, and I'm going to look out for him. Give him his backpack now!" They paused. There was a flash of something, almost like worry, across his face, and Bud was no longer laughing. Then Clay spat on the ground in front of Molly. "Fine. You want to get into it too? I've been waiting for this day for a long time. Let's just see how fast you are, little girl." Clay took a step forward and balled his hands into fists. Molly stood firm, but Daniel could see the fear in her eyes. There had to be some way to stop this. It was Rowan who broke it up. He stepped between the two of them and tapped Clay on the arm. Rowan calmly looked up at the towering Clay and said, "Clay, if you hurt Molly, Eric will hear about it. You know he will. Are you prepared to get into it with him, too?" Clay glared down at Rowan, his face red with anger, and the veins in his temple ready to burst. He looked as if he wanted nothing more than to smash everything in sight. But he didn't. Instead, he put his fist down, tossed Daniel his backpack, and cursed under his breath. "Have it your way," he said. "But no one stays a kid for long. Not even Eric. I promise you, very soon, things in this town are gonna change. Then you'll all get what's coming to you. You too, new kid. Congrats, you just made my enemies list." With that, Clay stalked off down the road. Bud looked around anxiously and called, "But Clay, we'll miss the bus again. It's the last stop and we'll miss school. Dude, my mom will kill me." Clay kept walking, saying nothing. Bud stood there for a few more seconds before chasing after him, taking the cloud of foulness with him. Molly and Rowan watched them go in silence. Daniel wanted to shout or laugh or something, but the other two seemed so deep in thought, so full of worry, that he didn't say anything. He just waited for the bus with his new friends, a million questions swirling around in his head.